So we started on Tuesday, and we will continue to the end of March. Koans. Koans, in our tradition, in the Soto Zen tradition, are family stories passed down to us. What do they have to do with us? Don't know. That's the koan. And we're going to be using through the end of March a book I've never accessed before by Joan Sutherland called Through Forests of Every Color, Awakening with Koans. I did more of an introduction of this on Tuesday, and it is on tape. But Joan Sutherland's tradition, which is in the Aiken Roshi lineage, is a koan tradition. That's what they do. It's not like they don't do zazen, we don't do koans. I mean, we live in a time when everything is cross-fertilized, but the emphasis in our tradition is shikantaza, which is zazen. And then we have these stories. Joan Sutherland, the emphasis is koans and waking up through koans. And, as I explained on Tuesday, there are three major collections of koans. The Book of Serenity, I didn't bring it today. The Book of Serenity is the book of koans, the collection that is largely emphasized in Soto Zen, our tradition. But we all use them all. The Blue Cliff Records is a collection largely used in the Rinzai tradition. But again, they overlap, and the collections have similar things in them, and some are different. And then the Mumon Khan, which is Joan Sutherland and Robert Aiken's tradition. And those are the koans that she more brings forward in her book. I may be seeding, like I did on Tuesday, koans from our tradition, the Book of Serenity, just because I think it's nice for us to have some familiarity with everything empty, nothing holy, Bodhidharma. Who are you? Don't know. The longer you live with them, the more they're wonderful stories. Even if at first and ongoing, it's like, what in the world? So, she has a wonderful language, Joan Sutherland, and a kind of inside lifetime of ways of describing and framing ways to practice with koans, which I think will be really helpful for us. Because then in April, the month of April, starting beginning April 1st, I'm going to be away traveling with my family in New Zealand. And during that time, senior Dharma Heart Zen practitioners in couplets are going to be leading the Sangha and bringing forward koans from the hidden lamp. So this is a way to kind of warm up and lead us into those, to give us some container and background. And as I explained on Tuesday, the Hidden Lamp collection, I know both Susan and Florence, when they started collecting those, nobody thought there were any, I mean, this was like 10, 15 years ago, maybe? Nobody knew there were any koans with women in them. I mean, there were a few, and then all of a sudden, it's like, lo and behold, somebody starts looking, and there's koans everywhere with women in them, and that's what's in the Hidden Lamp, and there's beautiful commentaries by women all over the world, women practitioners, and our Sangha members will be bringing forward those koans with commentaries, and of course I would imagine inviting you to find your own. So all in all, I hope this is, well, I know it'll be fun because it is fun. So here, I'm going to begin with what I read this on Tuesday from Joan Sutherland. I just like it. It's the preface. She says, "For a long time, I thought of the koan tradition as a giant dragon curled at the bottom of the ocean." See, already got your attention, huh? It's not something dry and distant, it's something down there rumbling. Every once in a while, something happens in that koan dragon's dream, and she stirs and lifts a shoulder or flicks her tail, murmuring to herself. Those of us listening for dragon murmurs do our best to interpret, and the tradition evolves. So this is an alive tradition. This is an alive tradition. If they don't come alive through us, these stories, Zazen, sitting Zazen is an alive tradition. This is it, folks. This very moment is where all the ancestors, past, present, and future, are right here. So listen deeply and creatively. Like, what is this? Okay. So, she describes four different ways of looking. Four different ways of looking at a koan. I'm going to today, I think I'll have time to describe two of them. I think they're vivid and beautiful, and then probably next Tuesday we'll do the other two. But just as an overview, from her description of deep investigation of koans in the Pacific Zen school that she co-founded. First one is, she calls them golden moments, and they're based in beauty. It's based in beauty. We'll talk about that more. Second is, she calls it born in the fire, born in the suffering of this world. Here, right here. Don't dissociate, don't go over it. Beauty is wonderful, but it's everything. Third is, she calls the Great Sutra, which is the whole world is singing the Dharma. Reality is the sutra. How do we penetrate it? And the fourth is, she calls the One Who Asks, which is the practice of you are you and going beyond you. You are so much more than you can even begin to imagine. So we'll start with golden. She starts with this quote by Willa Cather. The air and the earth interpenetrate in the warm gusts of spring. The soil is full of sunlight, and the sunlight full of red dust. The air one breathed was saturated with earthy smells, and the grass underfoot had a reflection of the blue sky in it. Kind of brings you to present, doesn't it? Full, round, alive moment. So, her description of entering is that there are layers to our consciousness and layers in the journey we make with the koan. First layer is the story. When I was a child, we used to do this and that. And then we narrate our lives to ourselves, and there's a self. The figure is the backdrop. The self is in the center. The landscape is in the backdrop. And time and place, she says, are the field through which an individual consciousness moves with its own momentum. Stories usually have meaning, full of feeling. I used to do this, I used to do that. This is the story of my life. We all got those, right? And sometimes it's always important to investigate them. Therapy can be useful in terms of investigating, but that's not all of it. Second, there's a layer of, she calls it sense memory. The hot sand under feet calloused from years of walking on the beach. The exhilaration of knowing, even as a child, that I could dive under any wave and find that calm place just above the sand. The smell of the turpentine we used to use at the end of the day to clean off the tar that came from offshore oil rigs. This is the self in the landscape, where consciousness is diffuse, wide open, and takes in and is taken in by the other. It's not just solitary self walking through. It's call and response with and for the whole universe, and it happens through our sense gates. This is fun, isn't it? I like the way she describes this. You can tell she knows this from the inside out. Third, below that, there's just the light. The light that the light that she sometimes experiences. She was talking about Diebenkorn's paintings. Light. Everything is brilliant with the same light which comes from everywhere and nowhere at once, inside and outside, and is the stuff of which it is all made. Now I know my experience has always been, and I know we all experience the world differently, is my lived experience has always been through light. My memories are light and shadow and standing in the midst of light moving, and it's kind of wonderful when you start. It's like walking outside today and feeling the light and the sun on my skin. I was moving, sense gate of skin, and the sound of the chickens being happy that it was a sunny day, but light. Everything is illumined with light, and sometimes we're more aware of that than others. She says, we travel through all these realms when we work with koans. Each koan is asking us to enter it through these gates. This is how we explore our own story and our own experience. And then there are moments where everything drops away. It isn't about anything at all, but is the light itself coming from everywhere and nowhere at all at once. It's just the whole world turns and is open, and then we just usually go back to our own plotting reality of what am I going to cook for dinner, and I mean that's just the way it is. So she says, how do we move through these layers? Here's a poem by Li Shuangho, who was writing at the time of the great Chinese koan collections that were being made almost 1,000 years ago. She evokes the encounter with koan, or the truth of our own lives. Often I recall that day, the river pavilion in the setting sun. Often I recall that day, the river pavilion in the setting sun, and we too drunk to know the way home. As our high spirits fled, we started to return late in our boat, but were confused. Entered deeply, a place where the flowering lotus was in full bloom. And struggling to go through, we startled a whole sandbank of herons into flight. Can feel it, can't you? Alive. Those are the golden moments. We're caught up in struggle, just trying to get through, don't notice the lotus in full bloom all around us, and suddenly something happens, and there's a great whoosh and a blur of movement and everything. The wandering day, the struggle to get home, falls softly into the water, and the whole universe is herein. We all know this, right? And koans can evoke it, and are evoked. The day will return, we still have to get home, but it's been changed by our experience of the herons, the messengers of eternity, who have reminded us that we too, golden moments and dispirited ones, are eternity itself. You feel that in your body? I can feel that in my body. We know it. Koans don't give us information about things. They present the thing itself. They don't teach us something to know. They illuminate a state of consciousness that is alive. It's always here. Her description of it as beauty. a mental solvent that dissolves everything else, melting it into radiance. I think it's why we like to go into nature. There are moments where things just dissolve and it's radiant, and we know it. And it's interconnected and alive, and we know it. But it can happen anywhere. It can happen anywhere. Listen, I love this. This is from a koan. Listen with your eyes. Listen with your eyes. See with your ears. That's a good koan to carry with you. And then our intractable trajectories might pause and then change. We're in a new moment, one that has never existed before, though the light there might feel like something we always carried inside of us. Everything stops and is infinite, and it is eternity, and we know it in that moment, but you can't cognize it, but you know. Okay, that's one way to enter. Now there are more, 3 more. Wow. Okay. Born in fire. In the 8th century, a new kind of Chan, Zen, developed in response to, I thought this might be helpful because it maybe sounds a little bit like our time. A cataclysmic time in Chinese history. In the space of 10 years, 2/3 of the population died of rebellion, invasion, famine, and disease. A sort of order was eventually restored, but Tang Dynasty China was no longer a flourishing empire, and life had a new tenuousness. A few Chan innovators, wanted not to escape the catastrophe looming around them, but to more fully meet it with what philosopher Simon Weil called a just and loving gaze. If they were going to be helpful, they had to develop, and quickly, a flexibility of mind, an easy relationship with the unknown, and a robust willingness to engage with life as they found it. I like this, huh? Sounds pretty relevant.
Yeah.
Perhaps most important, they needed a really big view. For them, Chan practice wasn't about getting free of the world, it was about being free in the world. How do we fall willingly into the frightened, blasted, beautiful, tender world? Please, Bodhisattvas, this is our koan. So she says, the first koans were experiments in this. Mao Zedai, ancestor Ma, before he settled down to teach, he made a 20-year pilgrimage through China's devastated landscape. He didn't turn away, and he did not sit in a monastery. He walked through the devastation of the world. And his teaching style was clearly influenced by what he saw. Someone asked him what was the essence of his teaching. He was fierce. A lot of the early koans are just like fierce, cut through. You don't have time. He said, what's the essence of his school? He replied, oh, it's just the place where you let go of your body and your life. Wasn't going to mess around. You can get clear right now, about your own nature and the nature of life, and then you can roll up your sleeves and start doing something about it. Now, he was a contemporary of I'm not sure how to say his last name, Schwiegen, who wrote Harmony of Difference and Equality, and the Sandokai, and the Song of the Grass Hut, which we have studied, and Shitao is one of the ancestors in our tradition, who, similar, came out of a time of difficulty. Whatever meets your eye is the way. Whatever meets your eye is the way. Everything you see is you. And at this time, what he saw included ruined towns, blighted fields, refugees starving by the roadside. All of this is me, and all of this is you. Move deeper into life. And encourage as many as you can to join you. So, before Ma and Shitao, koans were largely taught in lectures. They were more intellectual. They brought it down to earth. I also think this is important that we're studying our Chinese lineage when it seems like we're on the brink of war with China. So let's not miss the depth of the lineage and interconnection and depth to this country that we can easily make other, which is not to say there's not scary stuff happening here. What Ma and Shitao brought forward is it's about relationship between two people, relationship with life. We meditate together, talk together, we hear birds calling and cars laboring up the hill. As Ma and Shitao did with each other, we find a deep communion with someone we've never met, sometimes with someone who's been long dead. Practice is about making us fetchable. Isn't that nice? Fetchable. Yoo-hoo! It helps us to recognize what gets in the way of our being fetched, and then it gives us a method to deconstruct the obstacles. To be fetched by the whole world. Here's a little koan. Someone asked Shitao, "What am I supposed to do?" It's not unlike the koan from Tuesday of Emperor Wu. I wanted to ask Bodhidharma, tell me what to do. What's the most important thing? Shitao said, "Why are you asking me?" Well, where else can I find what I'm looking for? Are you sure you lost it? It stops you, doesn't it? It stops the mind. Ma. Someone once said they didn't understand one of Ma's famous sayings, that your heart-mind is Buddha. Heart-mind is Buddha. Ma replied, the heart-mind that doesn't understand is exactly it. The heart-mind that doesn't understand is exactly it. To be wholeheartedly unsure. To be wholeheartedly unsure. To take up a question like, what does it mean that my heart-mind is Buddha? I wonder, sincerely. Direct. What is it? What is it? Ma believed that responding to our time, I believe, I think all of you believe, I think the Bodhisattva vow is a profound belief that responding to our time is an essential part of realization. He once said that from the point of view of a bodhisattva, burying yourself in emptiness and not knowing how to get out is like suffering the torments of hell. It's like, don't know. Don't know. It's not comfortable there. But as our hearts and minds open in meditation, it is actually painful not to open our hands and hearts as well. For Ma, hell wasn't the trouble he saw all around him. Hell was turning away from it and trying to escape into a separate piece. That doesn't. Sit down in the middle of it. Sit down in the middle of this crazy, beautiful life. This confused, amazing heart-mind. The meanness of it and the, I have absolutely no idea who I am or what I'm doing or why I'm doing this or where we're going or what this crazy world is, and here I am, over and over and over, for the sake of all beings. And then suddenly, a flock of herons, or the moon, or the sun behind a cloud. And you completely know, but you don't know what you know. And the minute it was there, it vanished. But it's just the truth of it, and we do know it. And koans are stories passed along in many ways, well, to help us remember, but to help us remember that this is what human beings have been asking and yearning for and knowing forever and ever and ever and always will. And the great grace, there are many ways to do it, but we have found a tradition that goes all the way through. It won't disappoint us in the sense of the ground will always keep opening. And the herons will always keep surprising us. And probably, sadly, the suffering of the world will continue, different forms, but it will wake us up. It will wake us up. So cool, huh? And those are only two. Now there's two more. See, I hope you want to come back and for the rest of this month and next month and forever, because it's so, okay. So I thought we could divide into groups. What a surprise.